The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect those of the ANA or its members. On today's episode of On Scope, Amazon Prime Video's Rose Gia breaks down how to make marketing indispensable. And on This Week in ANA Magazine, how influencers are influencing the future of commercial ad production. Do you see what I did there? All that next on Scope. One and all, hello and welcome. This is On Scope, the marketing podcast, brought to you by the ANA and powered by Odyssey, a leading audio streaming platform. You can get your favorite podcasts, favorite music, and the favorite entertainment, all on the Odyssey app. I am your host, Mike Berberich, and with me as always, producer of On Scope, Ryan Dinger. Ryan, my goodness, what a week we just had.
Yes, it was, Michael. We are back here in studio, but that is not what was happening last week.
Oh,
we
my
were
goodness.
live and IRL in Florida at the Masters of B2B conference. An unbelievable experience. You were on stage, live episode, the first ever live episode of On Scope. I'm still riding high.
I honestly could not have asked for more. A big shout out to ANA's B2B team for putting together one of the best conferences I've been to in my 12 years here at the ANA. When I tell you that we were the last session of the conference and we had a full house.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Energized. They were up. They were there with us. Like, I honestly could not have asked for more. The entire activation was incredible. The House of B2B was such a cool idea.
Mm-hmm.
And let's talk about the AI Adathon.
Before we do that, I do want to say one thing.
Please.
Hashtag ANA B2B. There you go, Bill Zengel. We've said it on the show. We've now fulfilled our contractual obligation. But yes, the AI Adathon, a first of its kind experiment where they tried to take a months-long process, go from creative brief to in-market creative in 72 hours. It was mostly successful, but there were some hiccups. We were doing live content while we were there. And listeners, we do think we're going to be able to repackage this thing and put it out as an actual episode at some point in the not-too-distant future.
Yeah, first of all, hashtag ANA B2B, obviously. But second of all, you know, if you know anybody who was there at that conference, they can tell you the electricity in the room around that AI Adathon. Really just phenomenal. Thanks to everybody who was involved with that. And we saw firsthand how AI is coming into every facet of the marketing function. But for right now, at least, AI is not making our influencers yet. It's coming.
Yes.
I don't even want to know about it. I will think about it. I'm sure we'll be having an episode on it sooner or later. But for right now, still human and starting to influence the major commercial ad productions from the biggest brands in the entire world. Two guesses as to who's here to give us the skinny on that developing situation.
I don't even need to. It's got to be Matthew Schwartz, editor of ANA Magazine.
Here is my segment with Matthew. Here to discuss what's new in ANA Magazine is your friend and mine, Matthew Schwartz, Director of Content and Editorial Development here at the ANA and editor of our fine publication. What have you got for us from the mag this week, my friend?
Good to see you, Mike.
Likewise, buddy.
This week we got a nice piece on dramatic changes in TV advertising production. Now, as most marketers know all too well, the halcyon days of hopping on a plane, going to a cool location, shooting 30 and 60-second spots, distributing the spots on cable and linear TV, those days are long gone, eclipsed by a totally different scene.
Yeah, we do have to pour one out for the good old days. But, Matthew, I'm going to be honest with you. I feel like every few weeks you're coming to A&A Studios with a brand new landscape. So what's new with the scene this time?
Well, in some ways, ad production landscape is shrinking, but in other ways, it's growing.
Interesting.
According to Advertising Production Resources, or APR, the number of original production projects declined 11% between 2022 and 2024. However, much larger advertising productions, these are productions with budgets of $500,000 or more, rose by 12% during the same period.
Really?
And the number of assets generated per shoot doubled to 10.8.
Okay.
Big shock here. That's because marketers are scrambling to make sure there is enough inventory to fill all their media channels, social platforms, and soon maybe even carrier pigeon.
You know, I'm all for carrier pigeon
too.
comeback, so
Me too.
that part's just fine. But it really sounds like influencers are continuing their plan to dominate the advertising world.
Yes, everything is falling into place for influencers and the dollars as well. And marketing investments in influencers and creators rose 143% between 2021 and 2024, per a recent report by Creator IQ.
Oh, okay, but that's a good thing, right? Because it's the marketer's gig to go where the eyeballs are, and there have never been more eyeballs on the influencer space than there are right now, right? So, like, pop the champagne, maybe?
Yes, but with a caveat.
Of course there's a caveat.
Now, unlike traditional ad shoots, which were a pretty straightforward exercise, working with influencers requires a totally different toolkit. Russell Sharp, head of production at APR, summed it up nicely when he told A&E Magazine, quote, "As a marketer, you have to be very organized in understanding what partners you're working with. There are so many new channels and new ways of working. You've got to maintain as much control as you can." However, Maggie Resnikoff, Senior VP of Account Management at Open Influence, which has worked with brands like Dove and Michelob Ultra, was a lot more blunt. Ad production in the era of influencer marketing, she says, is a bit like herding cats, which I think you can relate to, Mike.
I was about to say, finally something marketers are more than used to doing. And shout out to APR and Open Influence, A&A members bringing that insight to the community. This is what we do best here, folks. But Matthew, how does this all play out on the ground, on shoot day?
It's a lot of moving parts, Mike. Pun intended. Now, when McCann hired a group of mixologist influencers to star in a series of ads for Smirnoff Vodka, for example, the agency structured the production to enable a wide range of outputs for additional content. What's more, during the shoot, influencers were given time and encouraged to use the branded set to create their own original content, in addition to appearing in the main spots. Now, that's a perfect example of the publish once, distribute many model, which is de rigueur for forward-thinking brands. Then there's Faribaline, which works with Reynolds and Le Creuset and conducts so-called content blitzes, or days-long shoots designed to capture and feed content long after the director has yelled cut.
Yeah, this is all setting up a very interesting new paradigm. You said it. This is a kind of new scene where, like, does the ad production start to take a back seat to the content creation and this kind of idea of playing around in a branded space? You know, it begs the question, what comes first? You know, like, as creators and influencers increase their clouts, and as we've seen for a decade plus now, those 30 and 60-second ads are just losing a little bit of their magic. Where does this all met out in terms of, like, production models? How are brand managers supposed to tackle all of this?
Yeah, it's a great question in that, the ad brief, which is where all this starts, may be fundamentally changing.
Goodness.
And it's not about perhaps recruiting actors from central casting, which was the norm. It's expanding that entire aperture in terms of talent. It's expanding aperture in terms of production, where these productions take place. Who's to say that a lot of these productions don't eventually take place in somebody's living room instead of an exotic location? But you're absolutely right, Mike. This is happening fast. And to your point just a few moments ago, influencers seem to be just ubiquitous and diffuse all over this industry. So at marketers, like everything else, there's barely time to wait. And we got a piece that features a lot of solid advice from marketers of all stripes on how they adapt to this new role.
Not surprising in the least bit, but you've brought another must-read article to our desk. I can't thank you enough, my friend. To find this article and more, including our weekly A&A magazine quiz, go to ana.net/publications. As always, Matthew, I am in your debt.
Thanks, Mike.
So there you have it. We're almost seeing the balance shift from a focus on that 30-second ad to the opportunities to create content inside the kind of brand's world. Yeah. Ryan, what do you think of this whole thing?
I think it makes sense, right? Budgets are getting tighter, so doing these big blowout shoots in the Maldives or wherever you go, that just doesn't seem tenable anymore. It doesn't seem like a valid use of the money that marketers do have. I think beyond that is like the traditional ad is not hitting anymore, right? Yeah. Like consumers are tuning this stuff out. They know an ad when they see it. So you have to have content. You have to have stuff that feels authentic, that feels like this is entertaining me. I mean, it's sort of like a Trojan horse, right? You need to kind of get the content in there, and then it's a commercial, so to speak, but not really. I feel like I'm surprised that this hasn't been the trend for longer, to be honest.
Yeah, yes, that it is really finally taking hold enough for us to be kind of carrying it. But I completely agree with you. One thing I found really interesting.
Oh, yeah, what's that?
For the entire history of influencer marketing, especially when they've been working with brands, is we've seen the brand go out into the influencers world. And that's worked in some cases, not been so great in others. I really like the idea of bringing the influencers into the brand's world.
Yeah.
The idea of letting them play around in something that you've created the environment.
Right.
You've put your branding, your vibe, your feel, what you want to convey, and now you're letting for authentic human playtime within that. There's something there. I think they got a stew going. So that is something I'm going to keep an eye on.
A delicious stew. Here's a question for you.
Go ahead.
So you're a rising star of OnScope. When do you become an influencer? Like, what is the line between personality and influencer?
Jeepers.
And I know we have micro-influencers and all this, but that's kind of what makes the question interesting.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Are you an influencer now? I mean, you were down there at B2B Masters. You were being recognized by some of the attendees.
That happened. We were quoted on stage at a national industry conference. People are using that OnScope at ana.net to reach out to us, and we love you for it.
Yes, we do.
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
You know what? Maybe when brands start sending me a lot of cool, free stuff with no expectation in return.
Yes, hint, hint, hint.
Let me run that back. When people start sending me cool, free stuff, maybe that's when I become an influencer.
Hint, hint, hint.
Anyway, on to our guest today.
Yes, let's move on.
Because, I will say, maximizing the ad shoot is a great way to make those ads a little more, shall we say, indispensable. And
that's why you're the best in the biz, Mike.
This
is why you are a budding influencer.
Exactly. We'll have the P.O. box next week for you to send my cool free stuff.
Hint, hint, hint.
Fantastic. But our guest today is not going to stop at just ad shoots. She's going to break down how we make the entire marketing function indispensable. And I'm talking about Rose Gia, an award-winning marketing and product leader. She's an author. She's a global speaker. She currently heads up growth marketing for Amazon's Prime Video business, where she and her team drive profitable growth across the customer life cycle with original and licensed content. I'm not done. She is also the creator of the Renaissance Marketer Mindset, which I love and which we're about to dive into. Oh, yeah. It's a new way for marketers to drive growth and innovation. You are going to want to stick around for all of this. My conversation with Rose Gia is up next. Everybody, I am so excited to announce that beaming into A&A Studios to chop it up with me is Rose Gia, author, global speaker, and head of customer lifecycle at Amazon Prime Video. Rose, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with me today.
I'm so excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Oh, I mean, honestly, when we kind of first met to set up this episode and kind of discuss what we'd like to take, I had so much fun. A lot of times we go like damn, wish we just recorded the kickoff call. We'd be all done. We could take the afternoon off. But no, I am just so very happy we get to discuss things because you've got such a unique perspective. And so I really think that our listeners are going to just have a great time and benefit a lot from this. So again, thanks so much. And if you're good, let's jump in the pool.
Let's do it.
Alrighty. So through your lens, not only as a marketing innovator, but also with your experience as an investment banker, which I absolutely love. I absolutely love that dimension to this conversation. How do we, as an industry, make marketing indispensable?
Man, I love this question because it kind of sits at the heart of what I've been really evangelizing in both my books and my career. And when it comes down to it, I kind of boil it down to three things that makes marketing indispensable. The first is we have to reframe marketing from a cost center to more of a strategic growth investment that really directly ties to business value. And this comes from when I used to do investment banking, where I spent a lot of time with CEOs, CFOs of major companies, and I heard them talk. And when they're talking, they're really talking about making sure that their profit and loss, their P&L is really strong. Yeah. And when you think about how we then talk about marketing, we often talk about marketing as an expense with a cost and a budget. And all those words really means and denotes kind of an outflow of cash, right, with no returns.
Yep.
And which is terrible because then, of course, all these leaders are thinking, well, in that case, if I'm thinking about cutting costs, then we might as well look at our expenses, and marketing is one of them. However, if you switch all of those words and really talk about investment, so marketing is an investment, it really shows that there will be some upfront costs, but there is a future payout. And for business leaders, finance leaders, when they hear investment, they automatically understand that there is going to be this payout. And so that makes it much harder for them to trade off, knowing that if they pull back on marketing investment or marketing resources, that they might actually lose out on future returns, right? Future growth. So that's one, is reframe marketing from a cost to an investment. The second one is very similar, which is you got to tie marketing initiatives to some of these top line business metrics. So one of the things I realized kind of navigating from on the finance side over to marketing is that marketing, we tend to shy away from connecting marketing to business metrics. So we don't like saying, oh, marketing drives revenues. But the reality is marketing is like the number one growth driver of revenues, of customer growth, right?
Yeah.
And so the fact that we shy away from using those terms or connecting those two also makes marketing seem like it's not doing what every other business is doing, which is driving growth. And so being able to tie those metrics, those like marketing metrics to business terms is going to be super important, even if it takes time. So one example I love to always give is marketers, we love talking about brand love, brand awareness, all of these like terms about kind of the future of brand, but we never talk about what that means. And the best way to connect it to business is really to say, well, guess what? When somebody loves your brand, they are more inclined to want to buy you over someone else, which means that you could put a premium on your price, which means that you could grow that revenue. And over time, did you know that brand can be actually an intangible asset on your balance sheet? So all of those things makes marketing super strong. So that's the second one. And I would say the third one is that, marketing is really about influencing a decision, whether that's getting a consumer or a customer to click to buy, or whether it's getting a stakeholder partner within an organization to say yes to your initiative. But it really is about influencing. So in order to be indispensable, you have to actually show value by being able to connect what you're doing to what some of these other people care about. So what your customers care about, what your finance, your business, your product, all these other stakeholder teams, what they care about. And all those things together will make marketing very indispensable.
I love it. I love it kind of across the board. And one thing that you said that now I'm realizing, I've been here at the ANA for almost 12 years. Before that, I was in the agency world for over half a decade. Marketing's here to make money. I don't think I've ever heard anybody break it down that simply. And good God, why not? I understand, I get it. When people ask you to predict the future, it's a little uneasy, but that marketers are uneasy to connect their efforts with revenue is then truly what are you doing if not that? So I really do love it. I've heard variations of that before, but that, if you're using the language of the P&L and you just say, well, if we L, then we can L, and therefore supported by L, and then hopefully that'll be good. Like, that is what they're hearing. So I absolutely love that. If we aren't spending money to make money in marketing, truly, my dear listeners, what are we doing?
Yeah.
So I do love that. And I think that, being able to speak in those terms, being able to prove out that you are adding value, whether that is through brand. I do love breaking that down, that it does show up on an investment sheet. I forget what guest I was talking about it in the previous weeks, but once there's an M&A, all of a sudden brand's very easy to put a dollar sign to.
Oh, 100%.
What is it about that moment that brings clarity to when, every other day of the year, it becomes this nebulous thing. So really, really do love that. And a lot of what you just kind of laid out is the foundation for your book, your movement, really what seems to be like a life's calling in the last, my goodness, has it been 10 years? And what I'm talking about is Renaissance marketing, which I absolutely love the concept. And I would, if you don't mind, I'd like for you to talk to me about the Renaissance marketer's mindset and why it is vital to thriving, especially in today's modern landscape.
Yeah. I feel like over the years, marketing has become more and more specialized, right? So we've got folks that are dedicated to one channel or one aspect of marketing. But now with proliferation of AI tools, and who knows what else is coming, specialization is going to get killed. It's going to get taken over,
100%.
which means that marketers are going to have to go back to what they used to be, which is more of the generalist, and really have to adapt to new situations. And so, I created the Renaissance marketer mindset to really help marketers tap into our already innate ability to not only adapt, but also create. And so I see the Renaissance marketer mindset like it's you take the essence of being like the Renaissance masters of the past, and you combine it with kind of the modern day innovations, right, that happen today. Yeah. So the mindset is comprised of 3 pillars. As you can see, I love threes, but 3 pillars. So first one is a Renaissance marketer should be multidisciplined, which means that you don't have to be an expert in everything, but you have to understand how all pieces connect together, very much like the Renaissance masters of the past. And this means being able to speak the language of some of your stakeholder partners, but also understand how great ideas in other industries might be transferable to your industry. So being that multidisciplinarian type of person will allow you to see opportunities in other places. And then the second is you have to think long-term like an investor. So this goes back to our earlier conversation around you have to understand the business and how marketing can impact the business in the long run. Not only that, you have to be able to speak about the investments that you're making, the payouts that you're going to have, how long is it going to take, why should you invest, right? So really talking and thinking like an investor. And then the third one I would say is, I feel like this one we all marketers know, but I like to emphasize, which is you got to balance the art and science of marketing. Like I know marketers tend to sway one way or the other. Like you're either super creative and you're talking about the emotional resonance in your campaigns, or you're very analytical and you're talking about the numbers and you're data driven. But the reality is you kind of need both, right? You have to be able to connect with a customer. And so that emotional piece is very important. But you also have to understand the numbers and the why behind the numbers. Like, why are, the number of customers that you have dipping, month over month, year over year? Something's happening, right? Like, you have to understand the why. So these three pillars of the Renaissance marketer mindset will allow marketers to really drive more innovative thinking, but also, again, make them very indispensable.
I absolutely love that. And it reminds me of a quote where everybody stops off before the very last line, and it's Jack of all trades, master of none. There's another line to that, and it's Jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. I think to your point, being a specialist is a very easy way to marginalize yourself out of this industry. And I think that, again, you don't have to be an expert on everything. To your point, you should work to have a deep appreciation for the spaces that you don't have a deep knowledge base in. I didn't mean that to rhyme, but it does.
I love
going with it. You know what I mean? Like, if you're an absolute creative spirit, great. You need to figure out what you can understand and appreciate about data analytics, and at least that will paint everything that you do communications-wise going forward. I think that it's whether or not it is any of those points are quote-unquote obvious to marketers, we're not seeing Renaissance marketers filling up the corners of our favorite brands. So it's something that we need to keep beating that drum until people are really applying this to their everyday.
100%.
So I don't think it's going to be surprising to any of our listeners to say that you're a very entrepreneurial individual. You got that entrepreneur's spirit, and it's really cool to hear you talk about, bringing that kind of energy and ownership inside a company as large as Amazon Prime Video. So this is actually a question that is kind of near and dear to my heart, and I would really love to hear your thoughts about it, because I think we've all been here before. You have this great idea, right? You've got it, and it's like, oh my goodness, I had this insight. This is going to be so cool, and it's going to move the needle at the same time. Like, we've got to do this. And then it goes to design, and then it goes to legal, and then it goes up to the ladder, and the ladder sends it back down. And by the time that it's gotten through the organization, it's almost unrecognizable. So how do you protect an idea while also doing the very necessary due diligence?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those like very common and frustrating experiences, and I've had plenty of that in my career. And it's actually one of the reasons that I wanted to write about this and how to help other marketers deal with this type of situation, because we all have great ideas, but after flowing it through a number of different folks who have very different goals, sometimes they get squashed, and sometimes they change into a monster that you're like, by the end, you're like, maybe we shouldn't do that. Yeah. And so, right. And so to your point, like protecting that idea, but also being able to continue to evolve it is really important. And I would say there is very much like a fine line between protecting it where you then say no to everything that could have helped, to being too open and then again turning it into a monster that you don't even recognize. So I actually like this one quote from Bezos. He used to say, you have to be very stubborn with your vision, but flexible in the details.
Ooh, I like that.
Right? It's such a good quote. And what it tells you is you have to know very clearly what is your vision of that idea. So it goes back to why does the idea matter? How does it tie to business? Like, what is it going to help with your business, with your organization? What customer problem are you solving for? And then that way, that vision, once you answer it, becomes your anchor to your idea. So after you articulate very clearly the why, you're going to have to start socializing it just to understand, like, is this something other people find valuable? Is it something that they would essentially buy in and support? But with that anchoring of the why, you can now kind of go out there and socialize. My suggestion is you start off with a few trusted peers, right? Those who can help you sharpen your idea, but not like dilute it. And then once you're kind of at a good spot with pretty good idea of like the pros and cons or how you want to navigate certain blockers, then you want to really broaden your circles. But you want to do it with intention. So I tend to call it road showing, because back in my banking days, that's what we did. We would have, we would pitch an idea, we would roadshow with our investors. And then once we got buy-in from everyone, then we go out into market. And it's very similar. Like, once you kind of have done your roadshow, you've understood what are some of the pain points that some of your stakeholders might have, or pain points that your customers might have in addition to what you thought you were solving for. That will give you a very strong idea in which you would have already started getting early buy-in. And one of the key things, though, I would say in this whole process is you don't have to take every feedback. So it means that you have to be discerning and filter, because it goes back to, if the feedback completely changes your vision, right, and it solves a completely different customer problem, not the one that you're solving for, then don't take it. Be like, thank you for your feedback, don't take it. However, if the feedback is really to sharpen your ability to execute the idea, then absolutely be open to it, because those are the types of feedback it's the details, right? Like, you want to be flexible in those details, because at the end of the day, you want your vision to come true. You want the people around you to help you make that come true. So if they have better ideas of how to make it come true, absolutely listen. But otherwise, stick to your vision. That will protect your idea. And when you do your roadshow and you get all this early buy-in, especially from those who might be blockers, then your idea is going to happen. And then before you know it, it's going to be out in the wild and you're going to be super proud.
I love that there's so many great bits of insight to glean from that. I really do love Jeff's quote about the vision being the thing you stick to and the details being the things you can negotiate on it, because that gives you clarity on where you yourself are willing to compromise. Knowing the idea's essence and what's really making it distinct and why you really think it's going to be special. Okay, we can talk about whether the ad has a orange or a dark red border, but we're not going to put the brand logo front and center if this is something to endear the audience in a different way, if that's not what we're talking about right now. I really love how you laid that out. And there's something in there that I also wanted to put a spotlight on. In my second life, I'm an artist, and I have learned the hard way, it matters what you show your work, who you show your work in progress to.
Yes.
You know what I mean? To some people, something that's half done is only ever going to look half done to them. They're not going to be able to go on that leap of faith with you to kind of close their eyes and see what this fully formed is and kind of imagine that reality. Those people are great for the 24 hours to launch, they can kind of crunch the reality and where you might want to put in little like guardrails or anything like that. But they are never going to help you finesse the essence of a great idea. So yeah, finding who your inner circle is so valuable in that. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
So listeners, stick around, because when we come back, we're going to explain why, contrary to what a lot of you may be feeling, now is the time to lean in with your marketing. Don't be skibbity riz. You need to stay cooking at the 2025 Social Digi Media Comp. #ANA.
Mike, what the heck are you talking about?
I don't know. I kind of blacked out. I think I was trying to do a TikTok.
Yeah, I would keep workshopping on that one. You know what actually might help you figure out how to make better TikToks is this ad read we have to do for this episode.
Oh, what do we got here?
Have you taken a look at it yet?
I have not.
Well, the copy's right there for you.
Would you believe it? What a coincidence.
Yes.
This is for the 2025 ANA Digital and Social Media Conference presented by TikTok and happening July 14th through 16th in Carlsbad, California.
Carlsbad, baby.
Ooh, and virtual, but my goodness. I know I say this every time, but I mean it every time.
That's a cool location.
You need to get yourself to
I'd much rather be in
Carlsbad.
Carlsbad than Rogers Good.
Yeah. Oh, my.
We're both on one today.
My goodness. Regardless of what we say today, you really should check out this conference, because you're going to hear about how top brands like Therabody, ELF Cosmetics, and Honda are using bold creative and creator partnerships.
Sensing a little theme here with the episode today.
You know, it's everywhere you look, Ryan, so you might as well master it. And who better to help you than the folks at the ANA? We're always putting top quality events, just the industry's finest. This is absolutely no exception.
Yeah.
This is one of our most talked about conferences.
It is.
The entire year.
It's one of my favorites.
Yes.
And it's very good.
Yeah. And if you're a client-side marketer, the entry fee, $0.
How about free 99?
Yeah.
Mike.
Just walk in and be like, I'm with the ANA. And they'll be like,
we're going to show you how to turn digital connection into business results.
You know, if you're as excited as we are, and we are absolutely out of our minds right now, you need to check out the agenda and save your spot now by visiting www.ana.net/2025digital. And now, back to our program.
Next time, run the TikTok copy by me before you read it on the ad.
Yeah, I didn't really show any drip on that one.
You did not eat.
All right, we are back. My guest, Rose Gia, Head of Customer Lifecycle at Amazon Prime Video. Rose, this isn't going to come as a news alert to any of our listeners, but there's a lot of uncertainty in the market right now. And as we've historically seen, that leads to a lot of brands pulling back, playing it safe, and to your earlier point where marketing is seen as an expense, it's also a very easy way to help balance that P&L sheet. However, this, data and you kind of disagree on this kind of this move. So why, in your opinion, is this actually the ideal time to lean in on marketing? And how do we convince our peers in the C-suite of this very thing?
Oh my God, I love this topic, and actually dedicated a whole chapter in my growth marketing strategy book on this. And part of it is because I lived through it, but in any economic uncertain times, right, people tend to make judgment calls out of fear. And so if we think about just consumers will pull back on spending because they're like, I don't know what the future will look like. Yep. And therefore I need to save up for my rainy day fund. And business decision makers, right, are human, most of them. And the human ones also have fears during similar times, right? Yeah. Because they are both a consumer and a business person. And so when the economic outlook is uncertain, these decision makers will also want to pull back on expenses because they also want to save up for a rainy day fund. And so, as you mentioned before, if they're going through their P&L and there's a big section called expenses, they're going to go after every one of those line items and think about how do you reduce. And marketing, if you haven't done the work of influencing all of your partners, then marketing is considered an expense. However, if you have done all that work, you've influenced your stakeholders, you've used their language, talked about marketing as an investment, which it is 100%, then now is the time when there's uncertainty to actually increase your investment because you're going to see outsized returns. And all of this is measurable and there's so much data behind it. And I'm actually going to give you a few of them because for me, this was how I was, I'll tell you a story behind it, but please. I was unable to actually get my leadership to buy in at the beginning, but then I was able to convince them at the end. But before I tell you all that, I do want to say, one of those old adages that I really love is when everyone else is zigging, you zag, right? This is one of those similar ideas in which when the rest of the market is super nervous and they're pulling back on their marketing, their ability to connect with their customers, if you are going in with more strategic marketing investment, then you're going to stand out because no one else is there. You're going to be the only person there and you're going to stand out. And that's going to give you that really good returns. But let me give you a few stats. And this is the stats that I love using. And so if we think about uncertainty, right, it really is just kind of fear of the worst that may happen. And so in business terms, uncertainty is really like recession, right? Like that's the worst recession instead of a boom or stagnation. So like recession is the worst. And so everyone's brains goes to like, recession, we got to pull back. But there are all these stats and research that people have done throughout the many recessions that countries have had. And in the US in particular, there are a few that I really love. So the first one is, according to the National Bureau of Economic Research, they're the ones who officially date the length of a recession. The average length of a recession after World War II is only 11 months, which means it's not forever. So recessions end. The second stat is Bain & Company, which is like a huge global management consulting firm.
Oh, yeah.
They did a study of 700 firms over a 6-year period, including the 90-91 US recession. And they found that twice as many companies leapt from the bottoms of their industry to the top because they were actually out front and center with their marketing and communications versus those who didn't. So twice as many went from the bottom to the top.
That's crazy.
And then the third stat that I love is there's another company called McGraw-Hill, and they did a study of 600 companies over 16 industries and over a period of 5 years, including the 81-82 US recession. And then they found that companies who invested in marketing during the recession not only saw returns during the recession, but they saw upwards of 14 times higher sales than their competitors 3 years after the recession ended.
Oh, wow.
Which meant that because they were there talking about how they delivered on for their customers, everybody else was quiet. They not only saw great returns during a recession, but they were top of mind for the years afterwards because, it takes time for people to get more familiar and more comfortable. And as a result, these folks who were invested in a recession, and while their competitors weren't, they see outsized returns. So those are the stats. But I will tell you firsthand experience that this is very true because, it's one of those things that in my career, I'm like, I lived it and I have learned from it and now I just tell everyone about it. But during COVID, I experienced very firsthand what it means to actually invest heavily in marketing during a recessionary era, while others pull back. So I was leading growth marketing at Amazon Grocery at the time, and I was actually just focused pre-pandemic. It was all just trying to educate people what is grocery delivery as a concept, because at that point nobody was really doing it, and people needed a lot more education. Yeah, right. And then the most dominant player at that time was actually Walmart grocery. And Instacart was second. The rest of us were kind of in third because, again, it was a small pie. We were all trying to educate our customers. But when COVID hit, we were all freaking out. So Walmart, Target, us, we were like, oh, we don't know what's going on. We don't know what the future will entail. So we pulled back on our marketing investment, like all of it. It wasn't just us, right? The whole industry went silent.
Yeah.
And of course, I was like, I don't know, guys. I don't know if we should go silent. Like, I've seen enough research, but I was unable to convince my leadership at the time because, again, it's a pandemic. Like nobody knew how to behave.
It's
right?
understandable. Like you pull it back. Like, we can talk about it now, but in the moment, it is understandable.
Exactly.
Still.
It's like everyone's like, I don't even know what's going on. And so, of course, everyone pulled back. But guess who didn't pull back? Instacart. So remember, they were So they were number 2 at this time. And so, the rest of us, we all pulled back, but Instacart, they actually went in hard. They were like, we're going to put in more money, but they were very strategic, and they put in more investment in search and social, which in hindsight makes total sense, right? Because all the consumers, all of us, were trapped inside our homes. The only way to find information was through social, was through search. And so, of course, when they were there, the rest of us were quiet. They were the only ones shouting, unopposed, that they were able to deliver groceries to your door so you don't have to worry about going outside. It was brilliant. And of course, something that they took a risk on, but the reward was significant. So in a matter of months, so search interest for Instacart overtook Walmart grocery, like almost immediately. And then by peak COVID, the search interest for Instacart grew something like 12.5 times versus pre-pandemic. Like 12.5, yeah. And then, of course, the rest of us, just organically and naturally, we did grow, but our search interest was like 4 to 6 times. So like not at the level that Instacart was. But that's not the crazy part. The crazy part is, just like what McGraw-Hill found out, is years after the onset of COVID. So we're talking 2020 through 2024, search interest for Instacart continued to outpace Walmart grocery by 2 to 8 times. So we saw a flip exactly of the number 2 player to be the number 1 player, because they took advantage and of an opportunity where they saw, I have a amazing value that I can deliver to my customers, and no one else is talking about their own value. So I'm going to go in and put in more investment. So it was freaking brilliant. And after that, I showed all the stats to my leadership, and we, on that, like literally, like right after the pandemic was ending, we said, we will never stop investing during a uncertain or recessionary time. And if anything, we will find opportunities to invest more. So it was a learning that we had to have.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you need to go through those things in life to really live the lesson. Some lessons need to be experienced on a first person basis, but that is such a cool story. And I especially love the stat about this really having a long tail effect, because consumers might be pulling back, might be a little more discreet with their spending, but they don't stop being consumers. And let me just tell you, listeners, they don't care what's happening behind the curtains at brands. You know what I mean? Oh, they didn't want to be here for me in a time of need, but I understand they've got that. No, we really don't. We don't have that level of understanding for the
we're
marketer's
very fickle
job, So I absolutely love that story, and I really do hope that it is empowering to marketers who aren't really sure how to show up, and maybe there's that people pleaser thing of like, look, I've shrunk my budget down for this year, maybe you'll give it back to me next year. I don't think that is the tack that you want to take as a marketer. So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that story, those stats. I really do hope that it has made the case for a couple of our listeners to go into the office and say, like, we need to pump the brakes on this safe calls and really ignoring the opportunity that's in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
So before I leave you to this fine day, we always like to give, and this episode is chock full of great insights for kind of our listeners to take back to their own businesses. But what is the one piece of advice that you would give to marketers who are struggling with implementing and maintaining entrepreneurial mindset within their own organization? What's that one kernel that you think everybody can, take away and do something with?
I'll say that one thing would be start practicing your Renaissance marketer mindset. Because it's something I developed after years of working with like startups and, financial services, big tech, like you name it. And what I learned from all those experiences and talking to amazing marketers is the ones who truly move the needle, that are indispensable, that are driving growth, are the ones who aren't executing campaigns, right? They're not just executing. I mean, of course, they're great executors, but they're really thinking like an entrepreneur in an organization. And the way to think like an entrepreneur is really to almost like be one. And so, the Renaissance marketer mindset sets up a marketer to tap into that innate ability. And so if you think about the 3 pillars I mentioned before, you got to be multidisciplinary, which means that in moments where you're thinking how to innovate, you're going to automatically start pulling ideas from different places. And by virtue of you innovating, you're acting like an entrepreneur already. You're creating, you're building, and, thinking like an investor. That is literally what entrepreneurs do all day, which is, how do I build something that's sustainable? How do I invest today in order to get those returns in the future? How do I make sure my shareholders, my investors, all of these people are seeing the value that I bring? So if you think like an investor, you're basically going to be able to set up what you're doing as a marketer in a way that these leaders and these other organizational stakeholders will see the value that you bring. And then like the third one, like that balancing of the art and science of marketing. Well, this goes back to, as an entrepreneur, you're going to have to constantly kind of prove out why you're doing what you're doing and is it working. So you're going to have to answer to not only the numbers, right, tying it to those top line metrics, but also being able to measure, like, is this thing working? But again, numbers are just numbers unless you know why things are happening. So are you able to balance that art and science and say, what is that emotional resonance that I'm bringing? How am I connected to my customer? How am I serving my customer? How am I going to measure that and then know when things dip, right? Like leading indicators, like when, you don't want to be the person that only knows that you're losing your customers when you've lost them. You probably want to know why you're losing them before you do. And so being able to set all those pieces up will make you not only having an entrepreneurial mindset, but it will make you not just a marketer, but again, it goes back to being like the growth driver, the most important person, second to the CEO, second to the business leader.
I love that. I absolutely love that swagger, that confidence in the mindset. My friends, fortune favors the bold. And if you're as excited as I am from this conversation, I cannot encourage you enough to go get your copy of Growth Marketing Strategy, Drive Profits and Sustain Business Growth wherever you find fine literature. I think there's like a website that is really good at book selling. It's not coming to mind right now, but you can probably find it on there. Rose, thank you so very much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Scope.
Thank you so much, Michael. I loved it.
Here we are again at the end of another episode of On Scope, the Marketing Podcast. I want to thank my guest Rose Gia for what was just a delightful and informative and energetic session about bringing marketing back to what it's supposed to do. make money. Think on that, guys. And as a reminder, if you have an idea for an upcoming topic or guest, we would absolutely love to hear from you. Our email, onscope@ana.net. And, as always, here is your moment of marketing meditation. Take a deep breath, relax those shoulders, and consider the following from William James, American philosopher and psychologist. Act as if what you do makes a difference. It does. Think on that, and I'll see you next week.